Forum right here on Newsmax TV. I'm John Bachman.
And I'm J.D. Hayworth. Let's talk about international matters. After the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, the village of Veselki was divided equally between the Ukraine and Russia. Locals accepted the situation and continued to live together peacefully, unfazed by the geopolitical divide. But now, tensions between Russia and Ukraine have left the future of the area uncertain, dividing loyalties and hindering transit across the border. The west of the village became part of the eastern Ukrainian region of Donetsk, while the eastern part joined the Russian region of Rostov and was named Avilo-Ospinki. Like many others, the question on the minds of the villagers is, what will Russia and Vladimir Putin do next? And here to offer his perspective from the UK, Jeremy Bradshaw. Jeremy, chairman of the Britain Club, a leading conservative think tank based in London. He's also a hedge fund attorney, active in conservative and international politics, and advisory board member to Lignet, the global intelligence website. Jeremy, that is quite a resume, and we welcome you here to America's Forum.
Oh, thank you very much, JD.
Now, Jeremy, yesterday the UN strongly condemned Russia's takeover of Crimea. How seriously are your fellow countrymen taking this land grab by Vladimir Putin?
Well, I think the British people are deeply concerned about this because this has echoes of what Adolf Hitler did in the 1930s when he took over the Sudetenland. He claimed that the Germans there, they wanted to be united with Germany. And this is what Putin has done with the Russians in Crimea. He's declared that that should be Russian territory and therefore it's going to become Russian territory. The question is, what is he going to do next, like you said in your introduction? And that is what's scaring everybody, not just in Britain, but across Europe, and I believe over here too.
Well, you mentioned the case of the Sudetenland, and a lot of people have brought that up in this instance as well, but of course that has happened in history. And I think you could also make the argument that people are using that as a case study in what can happen, and that there will be less tolerance for Putin to push even further ahead. Do you think that's also fair to say?
Well, there is a historical case for Crimea going back, as some people would say, to Russia. The point is it should not have been done in this way. It was done in a way which was against the Ukrainian constitution, against international treaties, and against what was accepted to be a legal way of doing things. Putin just held some Winter Olympics, which were supposed to be this huge triumph for his country. He blew it all by the manner in which he did this, and he has shown a complete disregard for international opinion. And it is very, very scary. And we've got to remember that this guy is hell-bent on restoring the self-confidence of Russia, and he appears to be prepared to take any action in order to do that.
And Jeremy, in the old days, under hammer and sickle, but for Mr. Putin, the hammer right now is Gazprom and the energy situation in Europe and in the Ukraine. Are the Russians really able to use energy as a weapon, and does that silence some of our other European allies?
Well, it's a very good question. Some of the countries in Eastern Europe are dependent up to the tune of 90% for their gas supplies from Russia. The Germans themselves, 35% of their gas supplies come from Russia. In the case of the Polish, it's over 80%. In the case of the Slovakians, it's 90%. It's incredibly serious. These guys can turn off these taps and create pandemonium. It's something which a lot of people have been concerned about for quite some time, and therefore there have been alternative measures being taken. So the Azerbaijanis have been building energy routes which bypass Russia, but we're not quite there yet. The Russians can still cause huge problems in the energy supplies to Europe.
And what do you think the level at which the European people in the United Kingdom or in Germany or France or elsewhere, at what point do you think they'd be willing to let those oil prices or energy prices rise? How much are they willing to accept? Because that could be a potential consequence of this as well.
Well, it's a good question. What's happened in this case is that the Germans have shown a readiness to use sanctions against Putin. In the past, they've been deeply reluctant to do this. They do not believe in sanctions inherently. But what do you do in a situation like this where a guy is transgressing international law and on such a scale? And we just don't know what Putin is going to do next. And the Germans, they are very, very concerned about this, and they are trying to send, in the sharpest possible terms, a signal to the Kremlin that you cannot continue on this basis. And even if it's going to hurt the European Union's economy, the EU leaders are actually prepared to put up with this. The other thing to bear in mind is that because it was a mild winter in Europe, there are quite high stocks at the moment. The storage facilities are over 50% full currently, and a lot of the allies have shown, such as the Qataris, a readiness to actually deliver emergency additional supplies.
Well, with that in mind, let's refocus on your home country and talk about the British economy. Give us your take. Is the British economy in recovery now?
It is. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Finance Minister, George Osborne, appears to have done a superb job. The figures have just been revised upwards, not for the first time. The economic growth is going to be 3%. The feel-good factor is taking a grip on the electorate, and he is timing the economic boom perfectly, I would argue, for the 2015 general election.
Which leads us perfectly into perhaps what you contemplate. You've run for Parliament before as a Conservative. With the elections coming up and with the coalition government of the test, do you see Conservatives winning again under David Cameron?
I think the future is very bright for the Conservative Party. David Cameron has done a superb job in the last few years. He inherited the most appalling economic situation. He's restored self-confidence in Britain. He is the most popular political leader there. Unfortunately, the Conservative Party needs to go up a bit more in the opinion polls to ensure that it does definitely get a majority at the next election. But as I say, everything comes down to the economy, and it is looking very rosy.
For the government cuts that have happened in England, there's been more success, obviously, in England than there have been in other places where they tried some of these austerity measures. Why do you think the difference has been?
Well, there has been a total commitment amongst the two political parties in the coalition, the Liberals and the Conservatives, to make sure that government spending is cut. Now, this is just work in progress. But they sent the right message to the international markets, and they've shown a huge willpower and determination to do this. Only a few days ago, they passed legislation putting a permanent cap on welfare going forward.
Wow.
And it can work, as we've learned from our guests
It's
today.
always good to have our British cousins. Jeremy Bradshaw, chairman of the Britain Club, it's great to have you here with us.
Well, thank you very much, JD. Thank you, John.
Great to see you, Jeremy. Thanks for hanging out with us. Much more to come here on America's Forum. We're going to get to your comments coming up later in the show. Feel free to write in and talk about any of the topics we're covering here on the show today. Reach out to us on social media. You can find us on Twitter at newsmaxtv.com, hashtag America's Forum. The email address is connect@newsmaxtv.com, and you can always find us on Facebook, facebook.com/newsmaxtv.